Hi, I'm very happy to share my inspiration, learning, and takeaway from the book Theological Reflection Across Religious Tradition The Turn to Reflective Believing. This is an amazing book. This is written by Father Edward Foley, the Capuchin friar, who has been teaching theology for many years in the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Here, the context of the book and the author teaching theology for many years for the international community came to understand finally that the, the term theological reflection is not alone limited with the Christianity, but all it includes every religion in the world. He wants to include all the religious traditions in the form of theological reflection. So he felt that there is something with the term theological reflection. Surprisingly, many religious traditions in the world they don't use the term theology. Rather, they use some other terms like a spirituality. So he wanted to form a new language. We know that there is a great linguistic philosopher called Ludwig Wittgenstein. He said that the language is a game. The author was so much inspired by Wittgenstein and he wants to create a new form of language which can include all the religious traditions. So, as Wittgenstein says, language is a new game. He says that it is not with the words, it is the rules and regulations of every language. For example, he says the chessboard. In the chessboard, we have the king and the soldier. There are two words, the king and soldier. And just by knowing two words, we cannot play the chess. Rather, we should know the rules and regulations of the particular game. Only then we can proceed. In the same way, every language in the world has different rules and regulations. So when we derive any theological conception in different language, we are not sure that we are getting the appropriate meaning in the context. That's why the author wants to have a real or general form for theological reflection, which can include every religious tradition. That's why he called it as reflective believing. It's really interesting that reflective believing, every religious tradition has got something to share with the other religious tradition. For the past centuries, the Roman Catholics were thinking that we have the truth. We are the light in the darkness. But the Vatican II on 1996 declared that everyone who does the work of the humanity is the part of the church, the part of the body of Christ. So it's very clear that every tradition does the work of Christ. So that's why the author wants to include every religious tradition into this one whole phenomena. So the goal of this reflective believing is integration, transformation, love of self, healing, loving God, community building, strengthening faith, and etc. I would like to say what is reflective believing in short. Reflective believing is not theistic at its core, but it is a language game that can be played by both theistic and atheists. While indebted to theological reflection, believing is a different language game because of its willingness to engage both theists and atheists. It is not only with the theists, it also includes, welcomes, and invites atheists too, non believers. Reflective believing is a form of meaning making. We also know that it's a kind of, it's not just a wisdom, it is meaning making. Shared humanity is common ground for this form of language game. Shared humanity. There is no single starting point. This is something very interesting when we come to understand the other writers who introduced other theological methods. They all have some starting point to build on it. But here, this has no starting points. That means it welcomes everything, any kind of method. Experience of believing and the narrating of those experiences are common important in the reflective believing. Reflective believing explores religious heritage and traditions. Reflective believing honors difference rather questioning it. Reflective believing is a practice, not simply an idea. And there are other languages also employed in this reflective believing. There are body language, silence, and storytelling. Reflective believing maintains an integrating trajectory for both individuals and communities. It is a kind of a bridge between individual and the community. Now let's see the similarities between the other methods and the difference. So first let's see the ministerial method by Whitehead. For Whitehead, experience, tradition, cultural sources, and critical listening are very important. And for reflective believing, experience, tradition, cultural sources, and listening are important. So we see the similarity between both the methods. And we can see one difference between two methods. That is, for Whitehead, experience is the starting point, whereas for reflective believing, there is no one particular starting point. That is only one difference we see. The parabolic method by Krishna Segar. According to her, parable can invite us to explore God's movement in our daily lives and understand how grace is inviting us for transformation. And we see here in reflective believing method, storytelling is very important. Storytelling. So here, when we say parables are stories. Jesus was using parables as a story to inviting ourselves to keep us in the stories and finding God's movement in the story. So next we see Christian Praxis Method by Thomas Groome. Both reflective believing and the Christian Praxis Method are similar in taking context very seriously. Both respect the religious heritage and the tradition. And again, the only difference is for Thomas Groome, the starting point is the Christian tradition, whereas for reflective believing, there is no starting point. Any starting point is invited. Spiritual Wisdom Style by Patricia and Debier. Both methods have a common concern for wisdom and not simply problem solving. Both are similar in making meaning. As we saw in reflective believing, both are similar. And both are similar in feeling and imagination. Feeling and imaginations are very important in spiritual wisdom to gain wisdom. So here we came to understand how important the language that we use in the term itself, theological reflection. So I think this is very interesting term, that reflective believing, that I would be interested in using in my future ministry, since I belong to the country where we have other religious traditions. So it will be very helpful for me to equip myself in the field of interreligious faith, interreligious dialogue. So it will be an equipping instrument for me to have dialogue with the other brothers and sisters from other religious traditions. So and also I think this form of theological reflection or reflective believing is only different names, but reflective believing has different understanding of theological reflection, which I call like a inclusive theological reflection. So I think this is very interesting, and I will be able to make use of this wonderful gift that I have learned from this book. Thank you very much.